You drive that piece of junk to Dad's memorial? My brother Marcus laughed, his Rolex catching the funeral home's fluorescent lights. Sarah, I know times are rough, but couldn't you have at least rented something decent? Dad deserved better than having his daughter show up in a 20-year-old Honda. I smoothed down my simple black dress and hid a smile. What he didn't know was that I designed this dress. I also own the company that manufactured his wife's designer handbag, the patent on the hybrid engine in his leased BMW, and the tech startup that had just bought his consulting firm's biggest client. Oh, and that piece of junk Honda? It was my daily driver by choice, not necessity. My name is Sarah Chen, and I learned long ago that the best way to build an empire is to let everyone think you're too small to matter. The morning of my father's memorial service dawned gray and drizzly over Seattle, the kind of Pacific Northwest weather that made everything look like it was filtered through old photographs. I stood in my childhood bedroom in the house where Dad had raised us alone after Mom died, carefully zipping up my dress. Black wool crepe, deceptively simple construction, no visible branding. To most people, it looked like something from Target. To anyone who understood craftsmanship, it was a $15,000 piece of architectural clothing designed by Kenji Nakamura, whose waiting list was longer than most people's mortgages. But my family had never understood what I did for a living. They thought I was still Sarah, the struggling artist, the daughter who dropped out of MIT to play with computers and ended up fixing cars in Dad's garage. They had no idea that I owned Nakamura's entire fashion house, along with 17 other companies spanning automotive technology, sustainable materials, and advanced manufacturing. The service was being held at Henderson & Sons, the same funeral home that had handled Mom's service 15 years ago. I arrived in my 2003 Honda Civic, parking between Marcus's leased BMW X5 and my sister Jennifer's borrowed Mercedes C-Class. Through the rain-streaked windows, I could see them already networking inside, treating Dad's memorial like another business opportunity. Marcus worked his phone constantly, probably monitoring whatever financial crisis he was juggling at his consulting firm this week. Jennifer posed for selfies with distant relatives, maintaining her lifestyle influencer brand even at a funeral. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus's BMW ran on a hybrid system I'd co-developed with Toyota 3 years ago. Jennifer's borrowed Mercedes used battery technology from one of my patents. They were literally surrounded by my innovations while pitying me for driving an old piece of junk. I slipped in through the side entrance, hoping to pay my respects quietly, but Aunt Linda spotted me immediately. Linda had always appointed herself the family's career counselor, dispensing advice to anyone she deemed insufficiently ambitious. "Oh, Sarah, honey," she said, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. "How are you holding up? And how's the little repair shop? Still keeping busy with oil changes and brake repairs?" "It's doing well, Aunt Linda. Thank you for asking." "You know?" She leaned in conspiratorially, her Botox preventing much facial expression. "My neighbor's son just opened a computer repair business. Very successful. He's making 6 figures fixing laptops and building gaming PCs. Maybe you two should meet, share some tips about working with technology. You both have such practical skills." I smiled the smile I'd perfected over 20 years of family gatherings. "That's very thoughtful. I'll keep it in mind." The suggestion stung in ways Linda couldn't imagine. While her neighbor's son fixed consumer electronics, I held 37 patents in advanced automotive systems. While he built gaming computers, I designed the power management systems that kept electric vehicles running efficiently. But explaining that would have required revealing truths my family wasn't ready to hear. The memorial itself was exactly what Dad would have hated. All pomp and circumstance for a man who'd spent his life with his hands covered in motor oil, teaching his daughter that the most important things happened under the hood where nobody could see them. The pastor, who'd met Dad exactly twice, droned on about his dedication to family and contributions to the community, while missing entirely the real contributions Dad had made. What the pastor didn't know was that Dad had been my first and most important collaborator. His tiny garage had been my laboratory, his practical wisdom the foundation for innovations that would eventually change the automotive industry. He'd encouraged my early experiments with hybrid engines, my late-night coding sessions developing control software, my obsession with making things work better than anyone thought they could. Dad had understood what the rest of my family never grasped, that real innovation happened in the spaces between what people expected and what was actually possible. He'd seen me dropping out of MIT, not as failure, but as choosing a different path to the same destination. It was during the reception afterward that my family's true colors started showing. The church hall was filled with Dad's friends from the garage, neighbors from our old neighborhood, and a surprising number of people I didn't recognize. Engineers and researchers who'd apparently known Dad through channels I hadn't expected. "There she is," Marcus announced as I approached the refreshment table, balancing a paper plate of church lady casseroles. He was surrounded by his usual crew, business school friends who measured success in LinkedIn connections and quarterly bonuses. My sister Sarah, the family mechanic. "Still working on cars?" asked Brad, someone from Marcus's MBA program who'd never met me but somehow felt qualified to comment on my life choices. That's so authentic, very blue-collar. I respect that kind of honest work. The condescension was thick enough to cut with a wrench. Brad worked in marketing for a mid-tier software company, the kind of place where innovation meant changing the color of their mobile app icon. "Someone has to keep the lights on at Chen's Automotive," I said mildly, accepting a cup of coffee from the church volunteers. The coffee was terrible, but it gave me something to do with my hands while navigating this conversation. "Speaking of which," Marcus lowered his voice, switching to his serious business mode, "we need to talk about Dad's assets. The garage, the house, all of it. The property alone is worth at least $400,000 in this market. Maybe more if we can get it rezoned for mixed-use development." What they didn't know was that I'd been paying the property taxes on both the garage and the house for the past 8 years through a shell company. The valuable property they wanted to liquidate was already mine, legally speaking, though Dad had never known it. "The garage isn't going anywhere," I said firmly. "Sarah, be practical." Jennifer joined our conversation, her phone in hand as always, probably scheduling her next sponsored post about grief and gratitude for her wellness brand. "You can't run that place alone. Dad was barely keeping it profitable even when he was healthy. The books are probably a mess, the equipment is ancient, and let's be honest, you're not exactly a business person." If only she knew. The unprofitable garage served as my primary R&D facility, the place where I developed the hybrid engine modifications that I'd licensed to 3 major automakers for more money than my siblings could conceptualize. The ancient equipment included some of the most advanced testing systems available, carefully disguised to look like ordinary mechanic tools. The garage's official books showed a modest repair business barely breaking even. The real books, hidden in encrypted databases my accountants managed, showed licensing revenues that would make Jennifer's influencer income look like lunch money. "I'm not selling Dad's garage," I repeated, my voice carrying a finality that made Marcus frown. He sighed, putting on his patient big brother voice, the one he'd perfected during his MBA program. "Look, I get it. You're sentimental about the place. Dad taught you everything you know there, and it's been your whole life for, 15 years? But Mom's medical bills, Dad's care expenses, he died owing money, Sarah. Serious money. The responsible thing is to liquidate everything, pay off the debts, and split what's left 3 ways." The irony was breathtaking. I'd been paying Dad's medical expenses for the last 5 years through a trust fund he didn't know I'd established. Every specialist appointment, every experimental treatment, every piece of medical equipment that had made his final years more comfortable, all funded through my various companies. The mortgage on the house? Paid off 3 years ago. The garage's business loan? Cleared 2 years before that. Dad's care facility bills? Handled monthly through automatic transfers from my primary holding company. But explaining that would have required revealing truths my family wasn't ready to hear. And frankly, truths I wasn't ready to share with people who'd spent 2 decades assuming I was too simple to understand real business. "The garage stays," I said firmly, setting down my coffee cup with enough force to make the saucer rattle. "This is exactly your problem." Jennifer said, finally looking up from her phone long enough to deliver what she clearly thought was devastating insight. No business sense, no vision for the bigger picture. You're still thinking like a mechanic instead of an entrepreneur. Like, Dad was great and all, but he was from a different generation. You can't just keep doing the same things he did and expect different results. If only she knew what different results looked like. If only she understood that my mechanic's vision had resulted in 17 patents in automotive technology, 3 successful tech startups, and a portfolio of investments that would make her lifestyle influencer dreams look like pocket change. Sarah needs to think strategically, Brad chimed in, apparently now part of our family business discussion. The automotive industry is changing fast. Electric vehicles, autonomous driving, artificial intelligence. That's where the money is. Working on old-fashioned combustion engines is like being a blacksmith in the automobile age. I almost choked on my terrible coffee. Brad's understanding of automotive technology apparently came from Tesla marketing materials and TED Talks. He had no idea that I held core patents in electric vehicle battery management, that my hybrid systems were being used in the very EVs he thought represented the future, that the artificial intelligence he mentioned was largely mathematical optimization algorithms I'd been writing since my MIT days. That's when Marcus delivered his coup de grace, the argument he'd clearly been building toward. Sarah, I've been talking to some people, real estate developers, investment groups. They're very interested in Dad's property, the garage, the house, all of it. Prime location for mixed-use development, especially with the light rail expansion coming through that corridor in the next 5 years. We could walk away with enough money to set you up in a nice apartment, maybe help you transition to something more stable. Something like what? Well, he exchanged glances with Jennifer and Brad, the kind of look adults give each other when discussing a problem child. Brad's company is always looking for administrative assistance. Good benefits, steady paycheck, normal work hours. It would be perfect for someone with your situation. My situation. 37 patents, 4 companies, a net worth that could buy and sell Marcus's consulting firm 12 times over, and still have enough left to fund Jennifer's lifestyle brand for the next century. But to them, I was still just Sarah who fixed cars and lived alone above the garage, a woman approaching 40 with no apparent ambition beyond keeping Dad's legacy running on fumes. Or, Jennifer added helpfully, I know people in the wellness space. You've got that whole authentic, working-class vibe that's really trending right now. We could probably get you some sponsorship deals. Maybe start a YouTube channel about car repair for women, Grease Monkey Goddess or something like that. Make your mechanical skills work for you in the modern economy. The thought of turning my life's work into content for Jennifer's demographic made my stomach turn. But before I could respond, Dad's old friend Pete approached our group, interrupting what was clearly meant to be a family intervention. Sarah, Pete said, his weathered face showing genuine warmth. I wanted to thank you again for everything you did for your father these past few years. That medical equipment, the specialists at Seattle Children's for those experimental treatments, the private room at the care facility. I don't know how he managed to afford it all, but I'm glad he had that kind of coverage. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus and Jennifer exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from patronizing confidence to confused concern. They'd been wondering about Dad's medical care too, but had been too busy with their own lives to ask the right questions. Insurance, I said simply, though we all knew Dad's basic Medicare coverage wouldn't have paid for a fraction of what Pete was describing. Must have been some policy, Pete continued, oblivious to the tension crackling around our little circle. And that donation to the community college's automotive program, $500,000 in your father's name. The scholarship fund will help a lot of kids learn the trade. Very generous. The silence stretched longer this time. Marcus's face had gone pale, his business brain finally starting to process information that didn't fit his assumptions. Jennifer actually put down her phone, giving the conversation her full attention for the first time. 500,000? Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible over the church hall's ambient noise. Where would Dad get that kind of money? Marcus demanded, his careful composure cracking around the edges. Pete looked confused by their reactions, clearly expecting this to be old news. Oh, it wasn't from your dad directly. It was from some tech company. Chen Industries, I think. They said it was to honor his contributions to automotive innovation. Apparently, he consulted on some patents or something. Really impressive stuff. Hybrid systems, electric vehicle technology, advanced battery management, cutting-edge research. Chen Industries. My primary holding company, the one that managed my intellectual property portfolio and coordinated licensing deals with Ford, Toyota, Tesla, and Volkswagen. Named after Dad, though he'd never known it existed. The company that employed 43 engineers and held patents worth more than the GDP of several small countries. Well, I said, checking my Apple Watch, the only piece of obviously expensive technology I allowed myself to wear around family. I should get back to the garage. Cars don't fix themselves, and I have a transmission to rebuild this afternoon. As I walked away, I could hear them starting to argue, their voices carrying across the funeral hall. Questions about money, about Dad's mysterious benefactors, about how their supposedly struggling sister had connections to tech companies they'd never heard of. The comfortable narrative they'd constructed about poor, simple Sarah was starting to develop some very inconvenient plot holes. That evening, I returned to Chen's Automotive, the 3-bay garage that had been my second home since I was 12 years old. From the outside, it looked exactly as it had for decades. Faded paint, hand-lettered sign reading, Chen's Automotive, honest work, fair prices. The kind of place that fixed your transmission and charged you what it was actually worth instead of what the market would bear. But appearances, as I'd learned over the years, could be very deceiving. I pressed my thumb to what looked like an old light switch near the office door, worn smooth by decades of use. The biometric scanner, hidden beneath layers of paint and deliberate aging, recognized me instantly. The back wall of the garage, which appeared to be solid concrete block, slid away on silent hydraulics that would have impressed the engineers at Boeing. The real Chen Industries occupied a 40,000 square foot facility hidden behind the modest garage, carved out of the hillside and extending 3 levels underground. The main floor opened into a design workspace that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Clean rooms where my engineering team developed the next generation of electric vehicle batteries, testing bays where prototype engines ran on advanced hybrid systems I'd designed, offices where my legal team managed a patent portfolio worth more than the GDP of several small countries. Good evening, Miss Chen, my assistant Maya greeted me as I entered the main workspace. Maya had been with me for 8 years, recruited straight from Stanford with a PhD in electrical engineering and an MBA from Wharton. She was probably overqualified to be anyone's assistant, but I paid her well enough that she could afford to be selective about her career moves. "How was the service?" she asked, her expression sympathetic. Maya was one of the few people who knew the full scope of my double life, and she understood the challenges of maintaining such elaborate deceptions. "Predictable," I said, loosening the designer dress that my family had mistaken for discount retail. "My siblings want to sell the garage and split the proceeds. They think they're being practical." Maya winced. "Do they have any idea what this place actually is?" "They think it's a failing auto repair shop that barely pays the bills." Marcus suggested I might want to consider administrative work. "Jennifer thinks I should start a YouTube channel about car repair for women." Ouch. Maya pulled up several screens showing real-time data from our various projects. "Speaking of which, what's the status on the Volkswagen deal?" "Final testing completed yesterday. The efficiency improvements are even better than projected. 37% increase in fuel economy with the new hybrid system, plus a 42% reduction in emissions. Their engineering team wants to fast-track implementation for the 2025 model year." I smiled, thinking about another licensing deal worth 8 figures, all flowing through shell companies that kept Sarah, the mechanic's daughter, completely separate from S. Chen, the mysterious automotive genius whose identity the industry had been speculating about for years. "Tesla called again about the battery management patents," Maya continued. Elon wants to meet personally to discuss expanding the licensing agreement. He's offering very generous terms. Schedule it for next month, and make sure the NDA paperwork is ironclad. I'm not ready for that level of public attention. My phone buzzed with messages from the family group chat Dad had created but rarely used. Marcus, we need to talk about the garage situation. This is bigger than we thought. Jennifer, did anyone else know about Dad's consulting work? Why didn't he tell us about this Chen Industries thing? Mark, Sarah, you need to be straight with us. What exactly do you know about Dad's business relationships? I archived the messages without responding. Let them wonder. Let them try to solve a puzzle where they were missing 90% of the pieces. I'd spent 15 years watching them make assumptions about my life based on the thinnest evidence. Now they could experience what it felt like to realize that their assumptions might be completely wrong. There's something else? Maya said, pulling up another screen. The Department of Energy wants to schedule a meeting about your battery technology. They're interested in incorporating your systems into their National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Initiative. What's the timeline? They're hoping for next month, but they're flexible. Also, MIT called. They want to offer you an honorary doctorate and invite you to speak at their engineering graduation ceremony. MIT, the school I'd left 20 years ago to pursue my own path. Disappointing everyone who'd expected me to follow conventional success metrics. Now they wanted to honor me for achievements they'd never seen coming. Decline politely, I said. I'm not ready for that level of recognition. Maya nodded, making notes on her tablet. And the Wall Street Journal interview request? Same answer. Maybe in a year or two when I'm ready to go public with everything. I spent the next hour reviewing project updates and financial reports. The Volkswagen licensing deal would bring in $47 million over the next 3 years. The Tesla partnership was worth potentially twice that. Ford wanted to discuss incorporating my hybrid systems into their entire truck line. General Motors was interested in my battery technology for their electric vehicle expansion. All of this money, all of these opportunities, flowing through a network of companies that my family didn't even know existed, while they worried about whether I could afford to pay rent on the garage. Around 10 o'clock, I finally headed upstairs to my apartment above the garage. The space was modest by design. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a living area filled with comfortable furniture and walls covered with technical drawings, patent certificates, and family photos. It wasn't that I couldn't afford something grander. I owned a penthouse in downtown Seattle, a house in Marin County, and a vacation property in Vancouver. But this apartment kept me grounded, connected to the work that mattered. My phone rang as I was making tea. The caller ID showed unknown number, but the area code was local. Miss Chen? The voice was professional but unfamiliar. This is Detective Rodriguez with the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. I'm hoping you might be able to help us with an investigation. My blood pressure spiked. What kind of investigation? We're looking into some irregularities at Pinnacle Consulting. That's your brother's firm, correct? There are some questions about their client relationships, billing practices, and fund management. Your name came up in connection with several contracts they've handled over the past few years. Marcus's firm. The contracts I'd steered their way to help keep his business afloat while he remained oblivious to the source of his good fortune. I may have used their services for some business consulting, I said carefully. Is Marcus in some kind of trouble? We can't discuss the details of an ongoing investigation, but we'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about your business relationship with Pinnacle. Would you be available to come in sometime this week? After hanging up, I sat in my modest living room, surrounded by evidence of the double life I'd been leading for 15 years. Technical drawings for systems that would revolutionize transportation. Patent certificates for innovations worth hundreds of millions. Family photos showing holidays and birthdays where I'd smiled and nodded while my relatives discussed my apparent lack of ambition. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the garage. I was working on Mrs. Patterson's Honda Accord, a regular customer who'd been bringing her car to Dad since the 1990s. when Marcus walked in wearing his best intimidation suit and an expression that suggested he hadn't slept well. "Sarah, we need to talk." I looked up from the engine bay, my coveralls stained with motor oil, hands covered in the honest grime of actual work. "I'm busy, Marcus. Mrs. Patterson needs her car back by 3. "This can't wait." He pulled out his phone, showing me a screen full of search results. "I spent the night doing research. Chen Industries. They've been involved in some major automotive patents over the last decade. Hybrid systems, battery technology, electric motor design, advanced control software. We're talking about hundreds of millions in licensing revenue." "Sounds impressive," I said, returning my attention to the timing belt I was replacing. "The company was founded in 2008, he continued, his voice taking on the prosecutorial tone he used with difficult clients. "The same year you dropped out of MIT, the same year you came back to Seattle and started working for Dad full-time." I continued working, letting him talk. Marcus had always been thorough when he put his mind to it, but thoroughness without wisdom was just organized ignorance. "Is it?" I asked without looking up. "Because I also found out that S. Chen, the lead engineer on most of these patents, has a very similar signature style to some of the modifications you used to make to Dad's demonstration engines. Remember those? The hybrid conversions you did for the community college's automotive program?" That got my attention. Marcus had been more observant than I'd given him credit for. Those demonstration engines had been early prototypes of systems that would eventually become worth billions in licensing revenue. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, wiping my hands on a shop rag. "I'm suggesting that you've been lying to us for 15 years. I'm suggesting that you're somehow connected to this Chen Industries company, and you've been hiding it while letting us believe you're barely scraping by." I looked at my brother, really looked at him. The expensive suit that was actually leased through his company's wardrobe program, a detail I knew because I'd helped arrange the financing through one of my shell companies. The Rolex that was a high-quality replica, though good enough to fool casual observers. The BMW in the parking lot that he'd financed at 18% interest because his credit wasn't as good as he pretended. Another fact I knew because I'd been monitoring his financial situation for years. "Even if that were true," I said carefully, "what would you want me to do about it?" "I want you to be honest with your family. I want you to stop pretending to be something you're not. And I want to understand why you'd let us struggle while you were sitting on this kind of success." "When did you struggle, Marcus?" He blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "What do you mean?" "When exactly did you struggle? When you were getting your MBA on a full scholarship that mysteriously appeared in your name? When your consulting firm landed that big contract with Pacific Northwest Power 3 years ago, the one that came out of nowhere and saved your business? When Jennifer's credit card debt mysteriously got paid off right before her wedding?" His face went pale as he processed what I was implying. Those were coincidences. Lucky breaks. Business is about timing and connections. And sometimes anonymous benefactors step in to help people who don't realize they need help. The garage phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Maya's voice came through the intercom system I'd had installed years ago. "Miss Chen, Toyota's engineering division is on line 1 about the battery management patents. They want to discuss expanding the licensing agreement to include their hybrid truck platform." Marcus stared at the intercom system, then at me, his business-trained mind finally starting to connect dots that should have been obvious years ago. "Miss Chen?" I sighed. The carefully maintained separation between my two lives was starting to crack, and there was no way to patch the holes without either lying outright or revealing truths that would change everything. "We'll need to continue this conversation later," I said, reaching for the phone. "I have business to handle." "Sarah, what the hell is going on?" Before I could answer, Jennifer burst through the garage doors, her phone already recording in what I recognized as her investigative journalism mode, the persona she adopted when she thought she'd stumbled onto content that might go viral. "I knew it," she announced to her phone's camera. I knew something was weird about this place. She'd clearly been doing her own research, probably hoping to find material she could turn into content for her social media channels. The mysterious family secret angle would play well with her followers, especially if she could spin it into some kind of inspirational narrative about hidden talents and family loyalty. "Look at this equipment," she said, gesturing around the garage with her phone camera. "This isn't normal mechanic stuff. These computers, these testing machines, this diagnostic equipment, this is like industrial-grade research technology." She wasn't wrong. What looked like ordinary automotive tools were actually sophisticated testing systems worth more than most people's houses. The computer she was pointing at was a custom-built system running simulations of hybrid powertrain efficiency. The testing machine was a dynamometer capable of measuring engine performance with laboratory precision. "Jennifer, stop recording." "No way. This is huge. My sister's been hiding some massive secret, and I'm going to figure out what it is." She turned back to the camera. "Hey everyone, so I'm at my dad's old garage, and I'm discovering that my sister Sarah, who we've all thought was just a car mechanic, might actually be involved in something much bigger. Look at all this high-tech equipment." That's when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Ford Motor Company Advanced Engineering Division. I declined the call, but Jennifer had seen it. Her eyes went wide, her influencer instincts recognizing content gold when she saw it. "Ford? Ford Motor Company is calling you directly? It's probably about Mrs. Patterson's car," I said weakly. "They manufacture the transmission." The phone rang again immediately. This time it showed Tesla, Battery Technology Division. Then again, Volkswagen, Electric Vehicle Development. Then, General Motors Hybrid Systems Research. My carefully constructed double life was collapsing in real time, like witnessed by a brother with an MBA and an eye for financial irregularities, and a sister with 2 million social media followers, and a phone camera documenting everything. "Sarah?" Marcus said quietly, his business brain finally putting pieces together that should have been obvious for years. "What exactly do you do for a living?" Before I could answer, the back wall of the garage started sliding open. I'd forgotten to reset the motion sensors after my late-night visit, and the system was designed to allow access when I was present. My siblings watched in stunned silence as my hidden facility revealed itself. Thousands of square feet of advanced automotive research and development, teams of engineers working at computer stations, prototype vehicles that wouldn't hit the market for another 5 years. "Holy shit," Jennifer whispered, still recording but now holding her phone with shaking hands. A woman in a lab coat approached us, tablet in hand, completely unfazed by the sudden appearance of visitors. Dr. Lisa Park, my head of battery research, recruited from Tesla 3 years ago with the promise of unlimited research budgets and the freedom to pursue breakthrough technologies. "Miss Chen," she said, professional as always, "sorry to interrupt, but the Department of Energy representatives are here for the battery efficiency demonstration. Should I show them to conference room A, or would you prefer to meet in the main laboratory?" Marcus sat down heavily on a work stool, his careful composure completely shattered. "You're S. Chen. You're the S. Chen. Among other things. The automotive patents, the hybrid systems, the electric vehicle technology that everyone in the industry has been trying to identify the inventor of. That's you. That's been you this whole time." "That's me." Jennifer lowered her phone, her influencer persona dropping away to reveal something more genuine and confused. "How long?" 15 years. Give or take. 15 years of letting us think you were barely making ends meet while you were running a multi-billion-dollar research company? Multi-billion, I corrected, walking over to a computer terminal to check the day's messages. The patent portfolio alone is worth about $2.3 billion at current licensing rates. The company's total value, including research facilities, equipment, and ongoing contracts, is closer to $4 billion. They stared at me like I'd announced I was an alien, which, given their assumptions about my capabilities, wasn't far from how they probably felt. "Why?" Marcus finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why hide it? Why let us believe you were struggling? Why watch us worry about money, about success, about making something of ourselves, while you were sitting on this kind of empire?" I thought about how to explain 15 years of watching my family from the shadows. how their dismissal of my abilities had given me the freedom to build without their interference, how their assumptions about my limitations had taught me to value my own vision over their opinions, how their casual condescension had motivated me to prove that success didn't always look the way people expected it to. Because, I said finally, turning to face them both, you never bothered to look deeper than the surface. You saw a college dropout fixing cars and assumed you understood everything about my life. You never asked what I was really doing here, never showed interest in my work beyond the occasional joke about grease under my fingernails, never considered that maybe I was exactly where I wanted to be. But we're family, Jennifer protested, her voice carrying a note of genuine hurt. We should have supported each other, celebrated each other's successes. Like you supported me when I dropped out of MIT? Like you celebrated when I said I wanted to work on hybrid engines instead of finishing my degree? Like you supported me every Christmas when you made jokes about my little hobby in the garage while you were building your real careers? They had the grace to look ashamed, though whether it was genuine remorse or embarrassment at being caught in their assumptions, I couldn't tell. I built this, I continued, gesturing toward the facility that stretched beyond what they could see, because Dad taught me that the most important work happens where people aren't looking. He showed me that real innovation comes from understanding things so deeply that you can see possibilities others miss. And you taught me, through years of dismissal and condescension, that sometimes the best way to succeed is to let people underestimate you. Marcus stood up slowly, his legs unsteady as he processed the magnitude of what he'd discovered. The consulting contract my firm landed 3 years ago, the one with Pacific Northwest Power, the one that saved the company when we were about to go under. That was you, wasn't it? Your firm had the right expertise for battery system analysis. I needed independent verification of some efficiency calculations. And my MBA scholarship? The full ride that covered everything, even living expenses? Dad was proud of you for getting into business school. He wanted to help but couldn't afford it. Jennifer's credit cards? The debt that just disappeared? She was stressed about money right before her wedding. Stress isn't good for family celebrations. Jennifer had tears in her eyes now, her carefully applied makeup starting to run. You've been taking care of us this whole time, watching out for us while we... She couldn't finish the sentence. While you pitied me for not achieving what you thought success should look like, I finished gently. While you worried about my future and offered me career advice and suggested I might want to consider more stable work. The weight of their misconceptions hung in the air like smoke. For 15 years, they'd constructed elaborate narratives about my limitations while I built an empire they couldn't have imagined. They'd worried about my financial security while I managed assets worth more than they could conceptualize. They'd offered me help while I was quietly solving their problems from the shadows. So what happens now? Jennifer asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Now you decide what kind of relationship we want to have going forward. One based on who you think I am, or one based on who I actually am. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. The DOE officials are getting impatient. Also, the Wall Street Journal called. They want to know if you'll comment on rumors that S. Chen is considering going public with some of the automotive patents. And your 2 meeting with the Volkswagen team has been moved to 1:30. I need to handle some business, I told my siblings. We can continue this conversation later if you want. But right now, I have meetings with people who want to license technology that could help reduce global carbon emissions by 15% over the next decade. As they prepared to leave, Marcus paused at the garage door. Dad knew, didn't he? He knew enough. He knew I was doing work that mattered, even if he didn't understand the full scope. He was proud of me for that, proud that I'd found my own path instead of following someone else's expectations. We should have been too, Marcus said quietly. Yes, I agreed. You should have. After they left, I spent the rest of the day in meetings with Department of Energy officials, discussing battery technology that could revolutionize electric vehicle adoption and reduce America's dependence on fossil fuels. Between presentations, I thought about my family and the strange journey that had brought us to this moment of revelation. The DOE meeting went better than expected. The officials were impressed with our battery efficiency data and wanted to fast-track implementation for federal vehicle fleets. The technology could reduce government transportation costs by 40% while cutting emissions dramatically. That evening, I returned to the apartment above the garage, but I wasn't alone. Maya had prepared a full briefing on the fallout from my siblings' discovery of the truth. "Your brother has been calling every hour," she reported, settling into my small living room with her tablet. "He wants to understand the full scope of the business. He's also asking about the police investigation into his firm." I'd been expecting this. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing about the investigation, but I did send him our publicly available corporate filings for Chen Industries. He should be able to figure out the basics from there." "And Jennifer?" "She deleted all the video footage from today. Apparently, she's had second thoughts about turning your revelation into content." Maya scrolled through her notes. She also posted something on her Instagram about taking a break from social media to focus on family. That surprised me. Jennifer's entire career was built on sharing her life online. Taking a break meant giving up significant income from sponsorships and brand partnerships. "There's something else," Maya continued. "The Wall Street Journal has been investigating S. Chen's identity. They're getting close to connecting the dots. I'd estimate we have maybe 2 weeks before they publish something." 2 weeks before my carefully constructed anonymity disappeared forever. 2 weeks before the world learned that the mysterious automotive genius was a college dropout from Seattle who'd built an empire in her father's garage. Prepare the crisis communications team, I decided. If this is coming out anyway, I want to control the narrative. The next few days brought a parade of revelations as my family struggled to adjust to their new reality. Marcus spent hours researching my patents, trying to understand the full scope of what I'd accomplished. He found licensing agreements with every major automaker, research partnerships with universities worldwide, and a consulting client list that read like a who's who of automotive innovation. Jennifer approached her own revelation more personally, reaching out to mutual friends and extended family members to apologize for years of condescending social media content about poor Sarah and her little garage. But it was my conversation with Aunt Linda that surprised me most. She called Thursday evening, her voice carrying a mixture of embarrassment and admiration. "I always wondered," she said without preamble. "Your father was so proud of you, but he could never quite explain what you were working on. He'd just get this smile and say, 'Sarah's doing important work. You'll see.'" "He never knew the details," I said, settling into my worn armchair with a cup of tea. "Maybe not the business details, but he knew you. He saw what you were building even when the rest of us were too busy looking at the surface." Linda paused, and I could hear her struggling with words. "I owe you an apology, Sarah. All those years of career advice, all those suggestions about computer repair shops and technical training programs. I thought I was being helpful, but I was really just being patronizing," I supplied gently. "Yes, patronizing. I'm sorry." That weekend, Marcus invited me to dinner at his house, not to discuss business or money, but just to spend time together as siblings. His wife, Amanda, greeted me at the door with an embarrassed smile and a bottle of very expensive wine. "I don't even know how to begin apologizing," she said, leading me into their living room. "All those times I suggested you needed career counseling or job training programs. All those conversations about finding you a nice office job with benefits. I was trying to be helpful, but I was really just being human," I said. "You saw someone you cared about apparently struggling and you wanted to help. That's not a bad instinct, even if it was based on incomplete information." Over dinner, Marcus's kids, my nephew Jake and niece Emma, bombarded me with questions about electric cars and hybrid engines. They were fascinated by the idea that their aunt had invented technologies they'd learned about in school science classes. "Are you famous?" 10-year-old Emma asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "In some circles," I said carefully, "but I prefer to let the work speak for itself." "That's so cool," 12-year-old Jake said, pushing broccoli around his plate while he talked, like being a secret superhero, but with cars instead of superpowers. I laughed, thinking that he wasn't entirely wrong. There was something satisfying about knowing that the hybrid systems in half the vehicles on the road contained my innovations, while their drivers had no idea who'd made their cars more efficient. "Can you build me an electric go-kart?" Emma asked eagerly. "Emma," Amanda warned, "don't bother Aunt Sarah with—" "Actually," I interrupted, "that sounds like a fun project. We could work on it together, teach you about motors and batteries and control systems." The kids' excitement was infectious, and for the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to a family project that wasn't shadowed by deception and hidden identities. After dinner, Marcus and I sat on his back porch while the kids played in the yard. The evening air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and Seattle's lights sparkled in the distance. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, nursing a beer and staring out at the city skyline, "about what you said the other day, about us never asking what you were really doing." And? I realize I never asked because I thought I already knew. College dropout, working in Dad's garage, clearly not living up to her potential. I had you categorized, and categories don't require questions. He took a long drink of his beer. "The truth is, I was probably a little relieved that you weren't successful in obvious ways. Made me feel better about my own struggles, you know? Like at least I was the responsible one, the one making good choices." His honesty was unexpected and appreciated. "What struggles, Marcus? From where I sat, you seem to have everything figured out." "Are you kidding? I've been scrambling to keep my business afloat for 3 years. That Pacific Northwest power contract you mentioned? That literally saved my company. Without it, I would have had to lay off half my staff and probably close the doors entirely." I knew this, of course. I'd engineered the contract specifically to help him without him knowing it. But hearing him admit his vulnerabilities was something new in our relationship. "And now," he continued, "I find out my sister is worth billions, and she's been watching me struggle while secretly keeping me from failing completely. I don't know whether to be grateful or humiliated." "Be grateful," I said simply. "Humiliation is a waste of energy." "Is that an offer to help me understand this business you've built? Because I have to admit, I'm fascinated. The patent portfolio alone is incredibly complex. The licensing agreements, the research partnerships, the international subsidiaries. It's like nothing I've ever seen." I studied my brother's face in the porch light. There was genuine interest there, not just the calculating look of someone who discovered a potential opportunity. "Would you want to be involved?" I asked carefully. "In what capacity?" I could use someone to help coordinate the business side of operations. The engineering and research teams are brilliant, but managing contracts with 12 different automakers is getting complicated. Maya's excellent, but she's overextended. Marcus sat up straighter, his business instincts engaging. "You're serious?" "I'm serious, but it would mean shutting down your consulting firm and joining something much larger and more complex. It would also mean signing confidentiality agreements that make attorney-client privilege look casual." "What about Jennifer?" I'd been thinking about my sister, too. Jennifer has skills I could use. She understands branding, social media, public perception management. When this story eventually breaks, I'm going to need help controlling how it gets told. And if we screw up, if we don't live up to your standards, then you'll learn from the mistakes and do better next time. That's how innovation works. You try things, some of them fail, and you figure out why. The conversation continued late into the evening, covering everything from patent law to family dynamics. For the first time in decades, Marcus and I talked as equals, adults with complementary skills who might actually be able to work together effectively. The following week brought news that would change everything. Detective Rodriguez called to inform me that Marcus's consulting firm was under investigation for financial irregularities and that several contracts they'd handled were being scrutinized for possible fraud. The good news, Rodriguez said, is that our investigation suggests your brother wasn't involved in the illegal activities. He appears to have been manipulated by his business partner, who was skimming funds from client accounts. I wasn't surprised. Marcus was many things, but he wasn't a criminal. He was just unlucky in his choice of business partners. The bad news, Rodriguez continued, is that the firm's assets are going to be frozen while we complete the investigation. Your brother's going to lose everything. After hanging up, I called Marcus immediately. We need to talk. Can you come to the garage this afternoon? He arrived looking haggard, clearly already aware that his business world was collapsing around him. I led him into my hidden facility, where Maya had prepared a comprehensive presentation about Chen Industries' structure and opportunities. Your consulting firm is done, I said without preamble, but that doesn't mean your career is over. I explained the investigation, the asset seizure, and the likely timeline for legal resolution. Then I offered him a position as Chief Operating Officer of Chen Industries, with a salary that would more than replace his consulting income and equity stake that would make him wealthy in his own right. Why? He asked. After everything, after years of treating you like you needed my help instead of the other way around, why would you trust me with this? Because you're my brother. Because you're good at what you do when you're not being sabotaged by criminal partners. And because I need someone I trust to help manage the transition when this story becomes public. Marcus accepted the offer, and within 2 weeks he was fully integrated into Chen Industries' operations. His business acumen proved invaluable in streamlining our licensing agreements and identifying new market opportunities. Jennifer's transition was more gradual, but equally meaningful. She started by helping develop our public relations strategy, using her understanding of social media and brand management to prepare for the inevitable media attention. Gradually, she became our Director of Communications, responsible for managing the company's public image and community outreach programs. The revelation I'd been dreading finally came 3 months later. The Wall Street Journal published a comprehensive investigation titled The Invisible Genius: How Sarah Chen Built an Automotive Empire in Secret. The article included everything: my patents, my companies, my licensing deals, and the story of how I'd hidden in plain sight while my family assumed I was struggling. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Interview requests from every major news outlet, speaking invitations from universities and industry conferences, investment offers from venture capital firms who wanted to fund my next projects. But the most meaningful response came from the automotive industry itself. Engineers who'd been using my technologies for years suddenly had a face to attach to the innovations that had made their work possible. Students who'd studied my patents in their engineering courses could finally learn about the person who'd developed them. The community college that had received Dad's Memorial Scholarship Fund invited me to speak at their graduation ceremony. Standing at the podium, looking out at dozens of young people who were just beginning their careers in automotive technology, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. Your instructors have taught you about hybrid systems and electric vehicle technology, I told them. They've shown you patents and case studies and real-world applications. What they might not have told you is that some of the most important innovations in this field came from a garage not far from here, developed by someone who was dismissed by her own family as not ambitious enough. I paused, letting that sink in. The lesson isn't that you should hide your talents or work in secret. The lesson is that innovation doesn't always look the way people expect it to. Sometimes the most revolutionary ideas come from the most ordinary places. Sometimes the people who change the world are the ones everyone assumes are just getting by. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me, Maria Santos, graduating with highest honors in automotive technology. She reminded me of myself at her age. Brilliant, determined, and facing skepticism from family members who thought working with cars wasn't sophisticated enough for someone with her abilities. They keep telling me I should go into software instead, she said. They say there's more money in tech, more prestige. There's prestige in solving problems that matter, I told her. There's money in making things work better than anyone thought possible. And there's satisfaction in knowing that your work makes life better for millions of people, even if they never know your name. Maria joined Chen Industries 6 months later as a junior research engineer. She's working on next-generation battery systems that could extend electric vehicle range by 50% while reducing costs dramatically. Looking back on that day at the funeral home when Marcus mocked my piece of junk Honda, I'm struck by how completely my family misunderstood not just my success, but the nature of success itself. They saw wealth and status as the measures that mattered, never realizing that the most valuable achievements often happen in spaces where no one's watching, built by people who care more about solving problems than getting credit. The Honda still sits in my garage, right next to prototypes worth millions of dollars. I still drive it to family gatherings, not because I have to anymore, but because I want to. It reminds me of who I was when I started this journey, and who I remain, despite everything that's changed. Marcus and Jennifer have both thrived in their new roles at Chen Industries. Marcus's business skills have helped us expand into new markets and optimize our operations. Jennifer's communications expertise has made us a model for how tech companies can engage with their communities authentically. But the most important change has been in our family relationships. We talk regularly now. Real conversations about work and dreams and challenges, not the surface-level exchanges that characterized our interactions for decades. Marcus asks genuine questions about the technical aspects of my work. Jennifer shares insights about brand management and social media strategy. We collaborate as equals, instead of operating from assumptions about each other's capabilities. The garage where it all began remains my primary workspace, though it's now officially recognized as the headquarters of one of the most innovative companies in the automotive industry. The 3-bay repair shop still serves regular customers. Mrs. Patterson brings her Honda for service, neighbors stop by with car trouble, and local enthusiasts come to learn about hybrid conversions. But behind the modest facade, 43 engineers work on technologies that will define the next generation of transportation. Clean energy systems that will reduce global carbon emissions. Advanced manufacturing processes that will make electric vehicles more affordable. Artificial intelligence applications that will make autonomous vehicles safer and more efficient. The irony isn't lost on me that the family who once offered me administrative jobs and suggested I start a YouTube channel about car repair now depends on the empire I built, while they weren't looking. But there's no resentment in that irony, only a quiet satisfaction in knowing that patience and persistence can overcome even the most stubborn assumptions. My name is Sarah Chen. I dropped out of MIT to work in my father's garage, disappointing everyone who thought they knew what success should look like. I built a multi-billion-dollar empire while my family worried about my future and offered me career advice. I proved that the most revolutionary innovations can come from the most ordinary places, created by people who refuse to let others define their limitations. And I learned that the best revenge isn't proving people wrong about you, it's proving yourself right, with or without their understanding. Everything else is just details. TLDR, family thought I was a struggling mechanic barely keeping Dad's garage afloat. Actually, I'm S. Chen, the anonymous automotive genius whose hybrid engine and battery patents are licensed by every major car manufacturer, built a multi-billion-dollar research empire in secret while they mocked my little hobby and offered me administrative jobs. The truth finally came out when journalists connected the dots. Now they understand why I never needed their financial advice or career suggestions, and they work for me. Edit, for everyone asking. Yes, I still work on regular customers' cars at the garage. It keeps me connected to real-world problems and reminds me why the technology matters. Plus, there's something satisfying about fixing a transmission that no amount of patent royalties can replace. Edit 2. No, I won't be appearing on any reality TV shows about my secret life. The work is what matters, not the drama. Though I did help my nephew build that electric go-kart, and he's now obsessed with engineering. Edit 3. Several people have asked about the police investigation into my brother's firm. He wasn't involved in the illegal activities. His business partner was embezzling funds. Marcus is now our COO and doing excellent work. Sometimes people deserve second chances when they're willing to do the work to earn them.